Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and today, yes, the final, long-awaited third part of my three-part show and tell, the complete run of the Golden Age series Boy Comics from Liv Gleason. In the first two parts, I covered issues 3 to 59. We're going to do the whole second half of the run, issues 60 to 119 this time. We'll be going through them a little bit faster. That's because, to be honest, in a lot of these, there's not nearly as much to talk about. The run starts to go downhill before it picks up again at the end, but there's a good chunk here we're just going to blaze through. So why don't we get right into it? We're starting off with a bang, big important issue, one of my favorites in the run, even though it's going to have some long-term negative consequences. It's Boy Comics number 60. You can see here it says, Iron Jaw returns. The dreaded terror of two continents is again on his vicious march of vengeance against Crimebuster. And then, yes, they're bringing out all the stops to return this to its original concept from several years earlier, because you can see here they're also giving away 10 free live monkeys. We talked about this in the first video. They gave away a live monkey for someone who came up with the name Squeaks. Here's Squeaks here, as always, messing with Iron Jaw. Interesting choice to bring Iron Jaw back. He died in issue 15. So the character had been gone for years at this point. There probably weren't very many readers that were still reading the series from that time. I mean, the book is specifically aimed at boys, ages 7 to 14. So most of their readership would have aged out of the demographic. So they're going to have to explain who Iron Jaw is. There's technically somewhere in one of these issues an explanation of how he came back from the dead. I don't remember what it is. It's kind of irrelevant. As far as I'm concerned, the real Iron Jaw died in issue 15. I'll get into that here because we're going to see a lot more of Iron Jaw. But the important thing is this is 1949, so it's like 5 years since Iron Jaw died in issue 15, maybe 6. And what else is happening in 1949? Well, most superhero books are going away. And so the lead story is sort of a meta commentary on the end of the superhero genre as the driving force in comics. Here we have, you know what, I might dig out issue 59 just as a contrast for you, because we have a costume change. So here's issue 59. He's wearing his classic costume, full hockey uniform, the shorts, the cape, the whole thing, right? Well, when we get to issue 60, you'll notice no cape, no shorts. He still has the hockey sweater, but other than that, he's just wearing clothes, and that's actually what the lead story is about. There's a fantastic sequence where his supporting cast basically holds an intervention to tell him that he looks stupid wearing this costume. No one has had the gumption to tell him, so they bought him a pair of pants. And they're like, where are the pants? And he's very reluctant to wear the pants because he thinks he looks just fine, but eventually he's talked into putting on pants. And for the rest of the series, he has pants. So here we are, issue 60, just one of my favorites. 61, we get another Iron Jaw. Here's where the problems start. And so when Iron Jaw first comes back, he is a vicious killer like he was originally. The problem is when Iron Jaw is around in the series, there's not much to do other than have Crimebuster chase and fight Iron Jaw, because Iron Jaw killed Crimebuster's parents. And so when he's not around, the writers have to come up with lots of interesting mysteries and stuff for Crimebuster to solve. But when Iron Jaw's there, they don't have to do that. It's just Iron Jaw's got some scheme, blow up a munitions plant, whatever stupid thing he's doing. Crimebuster finds out about it and they fight. And it's really boring. So it's kind of ironic that they bring this guy back in a story that's specifically about the end of the superhero genre. And in that story, they bring back a supervillain and actually revert to hero versus villain cliches. So I don't know why they were doing that. But again, 62, more Iron Jaw. He had been arrested and now he breaks out of prison. This is where the series starts going downhill because we start getting Iron Jaw, not every issue, but in a lot of issues. 63, eat your hearts out, DC. Lev Gleason's doing guerrilla covers like in the 40s. 64. Their cover design leaves a lot to be desired. What I don't know why, but Charles Biro was convinced, I guess, that they a lot of times will have a lot of little figures and lots of word balloons. Some of these covers take longer to read than an entire modern comic. They're just really cluttered, and so for me, they're a mess. The early issues of Boy Comics have some great covers before they started doing this. Here's 65. There's an airplane. There's a carnival. You get a lot of covers with transportation stuff. We saw a train just a little while ago. Here's a plane. We get covers with a lot of covers with boats, motorcycles. Here's another gorilla cover. It's 66, and there's like a crashed airplane, and there's like a modern day Tarzan who is leading the gorilla people. Okay. 67. Here's something you don't see that much in comics anymore. It's a dotted line. A dotted line to show motion, not just like the motion lines, but a dotted line that's like the gun was in his hand, ... and now it's out here. It's like a family circus where you have Jeffy running all over the neighborhood. Yeah, you don't see that too often anymore. 68. Here's where we're really seeing the mess that Iron Jaw's become. This is a cover where a guy who, when he was originally in the series, would literally eat people to death with his iron jaws, bite their arms off, and they bleed to death, and murder like kids. Right in issue 10, he bites two like children to death. And here he is on a cover where he's in a sword fight and he gets embarrassed because Crimebuster cuts his belt and his pants fall down. The stories in here aren't too bad. They're going to get worse, but it was definitely on a downward slide starting with issue 60. Here's 69 is a motorcycle cover. You get a cool New York City skyline here in the background. 70, another boat cover. Besides different transportation things, a lot of Boy Comics covers have sports, so we may see some of those, especially at the end of the run. We're going to see a lot of those. Here's 71. It's another carnival cover. There's quite a few carnival covers for whatever reason. I like this. It's got the kid's name on it. It says Larry Mickey. I guess that's what it says. 71. Look, he's let the water out. The concept is fine, but again, there's so much empty space. It's just you imagine if like a Bronze Age Marvel with the same cover idea. The perspective would be totally different. It would be so much more dramatic. I can just almost see a Gil Kane cover with the same concept. And the art would just be so much more dramatic. Here's another boat. Here's Iron Jaw. Again, hooked like a fish. We got everything. We got motorcycles, cars, boats. Iron Jaw being useless. This is interesting. We're going to start to see this a lot more shortly after this, so I'm guessing this issue might have sold well. No Crimebuster. It's just Iron Jaw on the cover now with some sort of hayseed and a straw hat. Now that I have a gun beside me, I'd like to see that Iron Jaw, well, ironically, but of course in the old days, Iron Jaw would have bit this guy's neck in half and killed him. Here, it's just comic relief. More comic relief, 74. DC, I swear, was reading these or something, because here's Iron Jaw in a gorilla costume. Notice every one of these has Iron Jaw on the cover, and the stories inside are getting very tedious. Very samey. Every issue, Crimebuster chasing Iron Jaw. Here they are in space, at least. They're in space, so that's cool. And we've got some cool space stuff coming up in a minute, although it's not on the cover. 76, here's another Iron Jaw comedy cover with a giant magnet. This is actually kind of a cool cover. I kind of like this one. A roller coaster another Carnival theme park one, roller coaster with Iron Jaw and the coaster's coming apart. Iron Jaw and a diving bell. Bathysphere, I guess. That's 78. There's 79. And for once, Iron Jaw's not on the cover. There's just the cover design on these is really bad. Interesting thing, you'll notice it says Charles Biro. Stan Lee was a huge fan of Charles, and I keep saying either Biro, Biro. I use them interchangeably. I've read interviews saying it's one way. I've talked to people saying it's the other, so I'm just going to use them interchangeably. So here's Biro's signature, and again, Stan Lee was a huge fan of Biro, and Biro was like Stan Lee before Stan Lee, and even more than Stan Lee, because Biro would take credit for everything. Now, Biro was an artist. A lot of the early covers were done by him. Before he was working at Lev Gleason, he was a cover guy at other companies. He did stuff for like Archie and some other publishers, and so he is an artist, right? But what he would do on a lot of these is, my understanding is, they'd have other people would be drawing a lot of this stuff, right? But Biro, Crimebuster was his pet character. So supposedly Biro would insist on drawing the heads. So he'd draw Crimebuster's heads and they'd paste the head on the panels. So the artist would do the whole thing and then they'd just paste a Biro head over it. And so on the covers, my understanding is there's a lot of that as well. A friend of mine, Mark Svensson, who is a comic historian and has a complete run of boy comics among many other things, contacted me recently, showing me a picture of some original art from a cover of boy comics, and on that there was actually a blank spot where something had clearly fallen off, and the signature was actually a photocopy paste. They just take his signature and just stick it onto the completed artwork like they do the head. So in a lot of these covers, they're all signed by Biro. We don't know who actually drew them, but a lot of these later ones in particular, I think it's very likely that Biro didn't draw them at all. He may have just drawn the Crimebuster head, and then they just put his signature on them. Okay, here's an important issue. We got a new supervillain, which is rare here, and it's a really idiotic supervillain called the Vacuum. Here he is. He's using a vacuum cleaner to swim incredibly fast, and he uses his vacuum in different ways because it can both suck and blow, which is a perfect description of this character. He both sucks and blows, and he uses his vacuum to like hoover up money out of like a vault and like steal stuff with his superpowered vacuum, but then he can also repel people by reversing the polarity. And this is what's really, really unusual about this, is that it's the first part of a 3-part storyline. Here's issue 81 and 82, and Crimebuster's not on either of these covers. This is where the series takes a drastic turn for the worse. Because in this 3-part story, what happens is Crimebuster is basically fighting everybody, but a bunch of other people get involved in crooks that are all fighting each other. And so we've got the Vacuum, and then we've got Iron Jaw, but then there's a group of characters called Sniffer and his Deadly Dozen. Anything can happen, and does, when Iron Jaw is allowed to join the Deadly Dozen. Now, Sniffer and the Deadly Dozen, they were characters that had a backup story for a long time over in the pages of Daredevil. That storyline was written by a different writer. Now, none of these have credited writers, but we know that a woman by the name of Virginia or Ginny Hubble wrote a lot of stuff for Lev Gleason, and she was the regular writer on the Sniffer backup series in Daredevil. And what happens here in issue 80 is, up until that point, I'm trying to see if there's one with a cover here. Up until around issue 76 or 77, there was a backup series called Dilly Duncan at Dorset High, which is like their version of Archie, and that was the backup series, right? What happens is, with this issue, Dilly Duncan moves to the backup story over in Daredevil. Sniffer and the Deadly Dozen move over to Boy Comics, and Crimebuster at the end of this three-parter disappears. He's still in the series, but he's no longer the lead feature. He's the backup feature, and he's no longer on the cover because now it's Iron Jaw battling Sniffer. Now we have a couple covers coming up here that still have Crimebuster on them, but you'll notice as well coming up here in a little bit. So here's 83, and people are breaking Sniffer out of jail, and Iron Jaw's like, I want to get out of jail too. Here's 84. This actually has a Crimebuster cover, so thank goodness. Here's Crimebuster over there. 85, again, we're back to Iron Jaw, and we start getting this on the top. America's Greatest Laugh Getter, like it's a humor title, right? Because these are supposed to be funny. Iron Jaw and Sniffer are supposed to be funny. Spoilers, they're not funny. It's not funny at all. It's terrible. The humor in them is terrible. Now, I don't know who's writing these. I have the suspicion, because we know that Ginny Hubble was writing Sniffer over in Daredevil, that my suspicion is that she wrote the three-part storyline with Crimebuster and the Vacuum and Iron Jaw, and then continued writing the Iron Jaw series while Bureau is still writing the Crimebuster. I don't even know if that's true, but that's my working theory. 86, here's another helicopter cover, another Iron Jaw cover. These are just universally terrible. Now, some of the Crimebuster stories in these are still fine, but they're short. He's getting less and less space. Some of them, he only has 6 pages, whereas just a little while ago, the entire book was all Crimebuster. And now it's this just crap. 88. I just can't stress enough how bad these are. Oh, I forgot to mention the space thing. Well, back in issue 80, something else happens in issue 80. It's basically a revamping of the whole series. Crimebuster's no longer the lead feature. Dilly Duncan's gone. Sniffer comes over. Iron Jaw and Sniffer become the lead feature. But there's also another backup feature. So every one of these issues has 3 stories in it. It's got Iron Jaw and Sniffer. Then it's got Crimebuster. And then at the end, it's got this character called Rocky X. Now, we'll eventually see Rocky X on 1 or 2 covers. And Rocky X is part of the space program. It's like Rocky X and the Spaceketeers or something. And they're like, it's all space stuff. What's interesting about the storyline is of note is that as part of the storyline, they eventually ended up fighting Yellow Claw. I feel like I just got that right. But got that wrong. But yeah, so Daredevil, the famous Daredevil villain, he returns in these storylines, and there's this whole thing where he invades the planet, and so yeah, it's really cool. It's really interesting. But the story still isn't very good, but it's one of the best things going during this run. So 89, here's another theme park, Palisades Park sort of cover. Iron Jaw and Sniffer. Number 90, Sniffer is disguising himself as a fortune teller. Iron Jaw, these are so not funny. 91. 92, America's Greatest Laugh Getter, absolutely not the case. 93, I said Yellow Claw, right? He's just called the Claw. I knew I had that wrong, but here's one of the few blurbs that mention it. Rocky X and the Claw. So this is part of the storyline where he's fighting the Claw. 93, they're on a ship this time. 94, Sniffer's a dentist. America's Greatest Laugh Getter. 95. Uh-oh, look at this. Big excitement. It's a Crimebuster cover. Could things be changing? Thankfully, the answer is going to be yes. We get one more cover without Crimebuster. Issue 96. America's Greatest Laugh Getter. We're about to get rid of that, but this is the last issue that still says that. 97, and we get a Crimebuster cover, and now we're back to Crimebuster. I'm a big fan of this storyline. There's a great, he basically, Crimebuster goes to Spain and infiltrates this like bullfighting ring that they're using to like smuggle like diamonds or gemstones illegally and blah blah blah. And there's this cover where he's got like a sword, like a rapier, like he's Zorro, and he's surrounded by people, and they're like, "Get him! There's only one of him," and he's like, "Uh, you may kill me, but not before I take out a bunch of you first. Who wants to die first?" And they're all like, "Oh crap, this kid's nuts." Anyway, it's a great sequence, and the series immediately gets better because Crimebuster returns to the leads feature. He was 98. There's a water plane. 99. There's a terrible accident at a car race, with a car going up into the crowd. Now, this is still early. It's early 50s. I don't know exactly what year this is. 52 maybe. There was an accident like this around this time. There were like 85 people died at a car race when a car exploded and went into the crowd. Don't know if this is before or after that. Here it is, Boy Comics 100. No particular note that this is an anniversary issue, but notice that starting with issue 98, and now it says Crimebuster's Greatest Adventures at the top instead of America's Greatest Laugh Getter. 101, we have another airplane cover. Number 2, we have a sports cover. Remember I told you sports? There's a lot of sports covers in like the numbers 40s and 50s, a lot of basketball, hockey, boxing. We haven't had those in quite a while. Then we had that race car cover. Here's a basketball cover. Here's issue 103. This is cool because the lead image, first of all, it's got this thing that's like, see, witness. Like, I love that stuff. I love that design. But it's the only cover in the run that has Rocky X as the lead image. Here it is. See, Rocky X and Simpy face death in disguise. Now, notice something interesting about this. They're not in space. They're in Korea. This makes no sense. But they're recalled from their space missions to become spies in the Korean War. And so there's a lot of like Chinese communist spy stuff now. I'm getting into the mid-50s. It's right towards the end of the Korean War. And when you think about it for 10 seconds, it's absolutely absurd. Because if they have the technology to fight Claw on a different planet or whatever, and like go to space and fight all these aliens, why are they having trouble with two dudes in a motorcycle? Use your space lasers, guys. Jesus. Okay, 104. Here we have all sorts of weird things. We got an airplane. We got some sort of rocket thing that's on a wire. So it's, I don't know what's going on. But the airplane, the smoke from Crimebuster's airplane is made a skull. It's some kind of warning. 105, another cool, this one's got an A-bomb on the cover here, which is helpfully labeled, use extreme caution, USA hydrogen bomb. So yeah, I would say use some caution on that one. We have another Rocky X thing down here. 106, they're actually jousting. So like I said, they really like their sports themed stuff here. 107, important issue, football cover. I've talked about this issue before. So as you know, I do my own series, The Crimebusters, which features Crimebuster, Chuck Chandler. And it's set with him off of college. And it picks up the continuity You don't need to know the continuity. You can read the series without having any of these or having read any of these. It's totally fine. But just for my own entertainment, I picked up the continuity from the original series. And in this issue, 107, this is the issue where Chuck goes to college. So this whole time he's been working as an unofficial agent with the FBI or the police department. Originally it was the FBI. Towards the end, it sort of seemed like it was the police department. They just never bothered explaining it. Doesn't matter. But originally it was the FBI. So let's say the FBI. He's working, and so basically what happens in this story is he's had this inheritance that he's been living off of from his parents who were murdered back in issue 3. And his financial guy comes to him and is like, well, I messed up your investments. You don't have any money. Sorry, you're broke. Goodbye. And so Chuck's like, well, I need a job now. So he goes to Louver, his mentor, who's the FBI director. And he's like, well, Louver, so I don't have any money. So what I want to do is I'll just start working for the force full time and getting paid for it. Everything I'm doing the same thing that I've been doing the whole time, but now you'll pay me for it, where instead of you just getting the free labor like I'm an intern. And Louver's like, okay, sounds fine. But then the government says, what? No, you can't do that. You can't just have some random kid with no training become an FBI agent. What are you, nuts? I think they realize at this point, what an incredible liability. How did we ever get any of these criminals prosecuted when we have some kid arresting them and messing up the evidence? So they're like, no, what? Oh, no. If he's gonna work for you, he's gotta go through like whatever. He's gotta get a degree basically, because Chuck, he goes to school, I guess, but he spends most of his time fighting crime. So they're like, so basically Chuck's like, okay, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to get my degree and then I can go to, Quantico or the police academy or wherever it is he's going, and I'll become an official government agent or cop or whichever it is. And so he ends up going off to Curtis Tech, which is the school that Louver recommends. And he gets into Curtis Tech. And so starting with this issue, he is having adventures off at college. So instead of being in the city and having all this like hardcore like murder crime stuff, it's like someone's trying to throw the football game, or we're on a field trip and we found an abandoned gold mine off in the woods. That sort of thing. Like definitely much less of a true crime feel and much more of a boy's adventure or a teen adventure sort of series. And so that's what I love. So that starts here. Here's 108. There are a couple of these issues, particularly early on, where they still have some crime stories and they have like a frame element where it's either like, before I came off to school, remember that thing that happened? And then they present a story that was clearly done, that was already finished before they made them change mind. Or he'll leave school for a day to visit his friend Louver and get caught up in a mission while he's back in the city. But that doesn't happen too often. Here's 109. He's fighting with his arch rival Jabbo. Jabbo is also on the cover of 107. And more sports ball happening there. Here's 110. We get another experimental plane cover. There's a few covers here. His best friend Stu is helping. He's passed out inside the plane. Chuck's passed out. Here's Stu. Notice that these now say CB's Greatest Adventures. And look, we're into the Comics Code era. We've had that for a couple issues. We're officially a post-code book. And post-code, the series faces an interesting challenge. I think it's the main reason they sent him off to school. They could see what was about to happen. Let me rewind a little bit. Last issue here, 109 was the first code issue. So 107, he goes off to college. 109, code. And we're seeing on these code issues, one part of the code is they can't mention crime, which is a big problem because the character's name is Crimebuster. So now they start calling him CB. Eventually, in the comic, they call him Chuck because his name is Chuck Chandler. But the other students also call him CB. It's sort of interchangeable. A lot of times they'll just call him, "Hey, CB." Like on this cover, Jabbo's saying, "Get off! I'm playing third, not you, CB." And we got a baseball cover here. 112, it's a cross-country race cover where someone is smuggling a giant clock under their shirt. That isn't going to work. 113, we have a boat capsizing cover. There's actually multiple boat capsizing covers over the course of the run. His on-again, off-again girlfriend, Anne Lamont, is here. When I say on-again, off-again, what I mean is Anne Lamont is the only female character in the entire 117 issues of the series that appears more than once. And she only appears, I think, in 3 or maybe 4 issues. But again, it's notable because she is actually a recurring female character. When they call it Boy Comics, they're not kidding. It's a sausage party. But Anne gets a couple appearances. I just turned Anne into a morally ambiguous character in the pages of my comics. But I wanted to use the character just to mark the fact that she existed. 114, Chuck has got to stop using these experimental planes because they always crash. This time it's an experimental helicopter. 115, we're getting these like cluttered covers. Here's Rocky and his partner's name is Simpy, which is a bad name for anybody. The Sniffer and Ironjaw down here. You may notice something though here in the Chuck. Look at the artwork. It's very different from what we've seen before. That's clearly not a biro face. You know, this here is what we're normally getting, right? This is a different artist. It's a very specific artist. Can you recognize the artist? I'll give you a second attempt because here's issue 116. And the cover is by Joe Kubert. So it's very exciting. These last few issues of the series, when Chuck is off in college getting involved in these scrapes with the experimental planes and like the lions and stuff. Side note, multiple covers over the course of the run where there's lions like escaping from traveling carnivals. There's one on issue 48, I think it is. But yeah, right at the end of the run, Joe Kubert does a bunch of interior art, not just covers, but he does the Crimebuster art for several stories. Only the 2 covers, I think. And basically, his best friend was a guy by the name of Norman Maurer. The 2 of them did a bunch of stuff together in the 50s in particular. They did their own line of comics. They invented the 3D comic process. Norman Maurer ended up eventually leaving comics to become the manager of the Three Stooges, which sounds random, but he married the daughter of one of the Three Stooges and ended up doing that. But Norman Maurer was the main artist on the Crimebuster strip for Lev Gleason and Boy Comics for many years, much earlier than this. And so, again, my friend Mark Svensson said he talked to Joe Kubert, and Joe had no memory of drawing any of these. He thought that he had only worked in Boy Comics as an inker helping Norman Maurer, but it's very, very obvious if you look at these that he was doing the pencils because nobody else draws like Joe Kubert. So it's really cool. I was really disappointed. I never had a chance to meet him. I was actually supposed to go to a convention and meet him the year before he passed away, and I was going to be bringing this to get him signed. I had a bunch of questions I was going to ask him about Boy Comics. And I wasn't able to go. Something came up, and then he suddenly passed away. So it's just too bad, but it's great work here. Here's 117, a strange story where they go to a dude ranch, and they ended up getting hired to be extras in a Western movie filming there. It doesn't make any sense. 118, just proving that every possible sport. You thought jousting was unlikely. Here's the storyline where Chuck gets in a feud with a master epee duelist. He also has a boxing match. And then finally, last issue, they're really embracing the change here. In this last issue, we get a new logo. I think if this is continued for a couple more issues, we would have lost the Boy Comics completely, and the Chuck Chandler at Curtis would have been the whole logo. I think this was designed to be a transition so that people that were reading Boy comics knew to pick it up. But I think it's clear to me that this was the direction they were going in. There's no backups here. Completely ditches Rocky X, completely ditches Sniffer and Ironjaw, all Chuck Chandler at school, and it's one just big long story. There's really no mystery. There's no adventure. It's all school drama. It all has to do with the hockey team and new students coming in and new rivalries, and it's very much like a school drama. It's kind of like Archie, except for it's a long form. It's a long form sort of more dramatic. It's not just like a gag strip. It's supposed to have humor in it, but there's action where they get in fights in the locker room and sports and stuff. So it's all just sort of this sort of college drama, and then it ended. It ended with 119 here, and of course, I'm publishing my own versions on Crimebusters. Again, I picked up the continuity, so I don't have them here. I've shown them off plenty of other times, but I have now published issues 120, 121, and 122. In fact, let me just show this to you now. So here's 120. You see I've gone back to the original classic Giant Boy Comics logo. They previously were using some variation of this with the Chuck in the O, but I went back to the old school one from when the series first started. This is my second print variant. I sold out of the first print. So for the second print, it's an homage to the cover of Boy Comics 10, which had Ironjaw here, and I replaced him with my villain Death Mask. 121, again, I picked up the continuity. So issue 119 is cover dated February 1956. And I went through all of the last issues in college, and when you read through them, they actually progress from season to season and semester to semester. And so I was able to plot out and realize, okay, this is taking place the beginning of the second semester of Chuck's sophomore year. So when the next issue starts, it's the beginning of the first semester of his junior year, so it takes place in the fall of 1956. So it's a few months after the events of issue 119. And so each of my issues is taking place 1 month later. So this 120 was September 1956. Here's 121, which is October 1956. This cover is an homage to the cover of Adventure Comics 74 by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. I thought that was appropriate because I actually brought in another character from Boy Comics who used to have a backup series called Yankee Long Ago. He's a character who, when he is asleep and dreams, he time travels to different time periods. And so since I was using him in the story here, I thought it was appropriate to have a Sandman cover. So I did this homage here, Boy 121. And then I've mentioned a couple times in the video, my friend Mark Svensson, he drew this Boy Comics 122 cover. I'm not a huge fan of the character of Ironjaw, but it does appear. I don't want to spoil anything, but he makes an appearance in this third issue of Crimebusters. So Mark did this World War II cover. Crimebuster says, "Don't fear fascism, fight it," which is something that may or may not come up in the story. You'll have to read it to find out. And we got Squeaks down here sipping a cappuccino, which is appropriate because this is an Italian map from World War II. And so a lot of people who are old school fans of this series have really appreciated this old school Ironjaw cover. So that's I've already done the cover for 123. I'll just put it up on the screen here now. I don't have a physical copy because I'm in the early stages of working on issue 4. So I've finished the cover for issue 123 of Boy Comics, but it's not printed yet. The story and the interior story is not done. But I mentioned Joe Kubert, of course, was one of the characters here. And since there's a sequence in this story that takes place in World War II, I thought that it would just be perfect to do a Joe Kubert style World War II cover. Of course, he had all these covers at DC Comics in the 1960s, late 60s and into the 70s, he had this whole subgenre of covers with the same basic layout, which is the heroes are about to go in somewhere they think is safe, but we, the reader, can see that there's a bunch of Nazis waiting to attack them or whatever. And so I decided to do a variation on this. This issue takes place at Christmas and involves trying to give some toys to an orphanage. So I combined all these elements to do this Joe Kubert homage cover for Boy Comics 123. So I've got a bunch more planned. Of course, I'm going to keep the legacy going. I love the series, love the character, and I'm really happy that I had the chance to share these comics with all of you, because I know it's a series that most people aren't aware of, and most people have never read it, and it's sort of lost to the dustbins of history. But 117 issues over 14 years, one of the few superhero characters who continued unbroken all the way through the 50s into the Code era, and really only ended because the company was blacklisted because they were the publisher of the Crime comics that Crime does not pay, and distributors would no longer carry their comics, so they had to go out of business because they could no longer sell their product, and not because the fans didn't want to read it, but because the establishment wouldn't allow the fans to even get a hold of them. So luckily we don't have to worry about that now. I can do whatever I want, and I'm doing whatever I want in the pages of Crimebusters. So yeah, it's very exciting. So thanks very much for watching. I really appreciate it. I'll be back with more complete run madness videos. Let me know what you want to see. I have, of course, more of my Avengers collection. I've done previously a couple videos showing the first 150 issues. If you want to see more, I have the complete run up to issue 502, so I can show as many more of those as you want. I have lots of other series. I may be doing ROM next. I've got a complete run of ROM, and I'll probably just show all of that at once. And I've got a complete run of Captain America, including the Tales of Suspense issues. So not the Golden Age run, but I have issues 58 to 454. So if people want to see those, I could do those next, but I have some other series. So just let me know what you want to see for your next complete run madness, and I'll see what I can do to bring that. So for now, though, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.